Hey everyone, welcome to the week of Gothic. If you're like me, your association Gothic at first might have been in high school with a certain type of people that dress and act in a certain way. However, Gothic has meant a lot of different things throughout history, and today I just kind of wanted to introduce that idea to you. So, Gothic literature first came about really in the Romantic period, at least the way we know Gothic literature today, because what they did is they wanted to return to the medieval forms. In Norton, they say it's an embrace of a counterfeit medievalism, a way to describe accounts of terrifying experiences. So the Romantic Gothic writers thought that they were returning to like the medieval writing and used information and motifs and settings from there, but it's not the exact same as medieval writings, and that's why we say it's a return to it, and it's the beginning of something new, not just like a repeat of it. Gothic, however, became labeled as anything of the macabre, the mysterious, supernatural, or the terrifying. So horror is a great way to think about it. Horror and definitely comes out of the Gothic element. And if you're like me and you don't like scary things, what we're reading is not scary how we would think they are scary today. So you're safe. Still read them. You won't have to have all the lights on afterwards. It has a lot of elements like castles, curses, ghosts, secret passageways, mysterious noises, darkness, moving paintings, and not the fun ones like in Harry Potter, fears of ravishment or oppression, virtuous women who are long-suffering and or get wronged, that one and the one above kind of like tie together in a way, and then catastrophe and recovery. So where did it start? Why did we have it? Believe it or not, Gothic literature came about as a response to landscaping and architecture. Horace Walpole in 1747 buys a house called Strawberry Hill and remodels it in what he calls the Gothic style. It's anti-neoclassical, so again, just constantly responding to what came before us, and it was not at all the normal for his time. He made a falsely Gothic style, so he kind of took medieval style and like warped it, but we continue to use that today, and that's what we think of when we think of Gothic architecture now. And a bunch of tourists came to visit and look at it, which then spread the design. So Gothic is spreading. So thanks, Walpole. Walpole also is the one that we attribute the first Gothic novel to, which is The Castle of Otranto. You're going to read a little excerpt of that novel. You're not reading the whole thing, but that's kind of considered the first Gothic novel. He was experimenting around with the genre. You can treat it like you could the idea of fan fiction. So he loved literature, he loved novels, so he wanted to put his own spin on it. As a fan of them, he wrote his own fiction. And he sees novels as the reclamation of the primitive emotions of fear and wonder provided by the romances of a pre-enlightened age. Basically, he wants to go back to before science was everything, and we were all enlightened and following intellect and logic and science, and go back to that wonder of the natural world. It is very popular immediately. People can't get enough of it. And it just led to like crazy printing, which means you're not going to get good fiction out of everybody. But there is still some good out there. And what's really neat for us ladies is that up until this time, women writers weren't as common per se in all fields, but some of the best authors of this movement are female writers. So that's like a really neat thing when we look at women in the history of writing. The general public loved Gothic literature. They couldn't get enough of it. Romantic poets kind of picked and chose parts they liked, so they used the break from the critical rules to expand their own poetry. They used some of the motifs, but they also hated it because they felt it was just too plot-driven. Things were solved too easily. It was controlling the masses, which means you could lead to a riot or something. Like you control mass thought, so we need to like get rid of it. And Gothic kind of divided things into high and low culture. So high culture, big name poets, people who were very literary snobby, you could say, were not big fans of the Gothic literature. And so they're like, ooh, that's kind of like lowbrow entertainment. So when you think of like maybe like blue collar comedy, that kind of divide happens. Some see Gothic literature almost like a drug. The masses getting addicted to it. They have to have more and more, which means it has to become more and more intense for readers to still be satisfied, which we see that connection to today's society as well. I mean, horror movies have to get more and more intense and more scary and more special effects to keep people as hooked, it seems. So that's a normal idea for us. We still have the similar tropes from when Walpole first writes his novel and the other novelists pick it up. We still have the same motifs, the same ideas. We still have the supernatural. We still have gloomy atmosphere. We may not be in castles, but we are in mansions a lot, right? Or big empty houses. We still have paintings that might move or random noises that scare us. So it clearly worked and is still working. Unfortunately, Gothic literature never was seen as a true literary form, and it still kind of continues to today. Elitists think it's trash, it's just there for cheap pleasures, but serious writers like Coleridge and Lord Byron used Gothic trends. So how could we be so dismissive of it? Why are we not taking it seriously? You're going to read an essay in which Aiken argues pros for the Gothic literature, why it's popular and why it's not necessarily a bad thing. And then you'll see Coleridge also write against a specific Gothic novel, but it could be applied to all Gothics. There's also an essay called Gothic versus Romantic, a reevaluation of the Gothic novel by Robert Hume. He's a critic, and this essay is referred to often. So I'm going to try to quickly move through it for you. But all these notes will be posted because I want you to read them all. He goes back in 1969 to look at the Gothic novel because by then it meant antique and barbarous with reference to architecture. That's the original definition, but people saw it as almost a barbaric literature as well. They were just romances from an earlier age when it started. So unrestrained exercises of the imagination. Again, the neoclassical period, the Enlightenment period had repressed that idea of exercising the imagination without restraint and just kind of going crazy with it. So that's where we see it. He does think that Gothic should have more credit than it is. So know that he is pro-Gothic in that he thinks it is valuable. Trying to skip ahead for you guys. He sees that there's 3 types of Gothic writings. He doesn't think all 3, people currently were organizing it in 3 ways, but he disqualifies them. You had the Sentimental Gothic, so it's like a sentimental domestic novel, but we add Gothic ideas into it. Terror and horror. Even though Gothic novels are set in the past, they are not historical novels. Do not confuse the original Gothic novels as historical fiction just because they're going back to medieval. They are only set in the past so we can disassociate with current society and current views. We needed that separation to be able to explore the exotic world with ease, so we didn't have to be worried about being truthful. There are 4 distinctive characteristics. I want you to go into my notes and read them. Psychological interest, attempts to involve the readers, direct use of the supernatural, and atmosphere in the use of atmosphere. And all those were used purposefully, as you'll see in my notes. You do have 2 categories under Gothic, terror and horror. Terror is more of suspension and probably psychological. Horror is the attack of the shocking. So horror movies, the jumping out and getting you in the shower, horror. Terror would be more of maybe like the possession movies because it's very suspenseful. It's all in the psychological, what's going to come. Again, I don't watch a lot of scary movies, so I can't give you specific examples because as much as I would love to educate you, I would not sleep for weeks. These continue to develop as good and evil are more and more ambiguous. Terror kind of sees a strict distinction between good and evil. That's why we have demonic possessions. But horror, it's kind of gray. Everybody is gray, and that's how it's ambiguous where true evil comes from. Yes. And just know that there are a lot of consistencies between Romanticism and Gothic writing. Both have unrestrained imagination, both consider psychology and reactions. So they are very similar. You can't have one without the other, truly. But Romantics see imagination as a way to escape their limitations, whereas Gothic doesn't think the imagination is what it is. They just use fancy and imagination to help you escape for a brief moment, but it can't bring you to a true truth, which is kind of where Coleridge and the other romantic literary highbrow crew kind of had their big issue with Gothic. So take a second, please go back and read those notes. There's a lot of information I skipped over for you, but without the Gothic genre, we wouldn't have a lot of the stories and ideas we have today. So it's definitely important, and I hope you enjoy it.